everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Strategic Negotiating in the Post-Shutdown World, presented by Meetings Today. My name is Danielle Lebrecq. I'm the lead destinations content strategist with Meetings Today, and I'm excited to welcome you to this webinar, which is one of many that we offer. Our webinars cover a variety of topics that are very important to the meetings industry, and we hope you'll join us for them all. We also offer a number of newsletters in addition to our monthly magazine, and be sure to check us out on the web at meetingstoday.com. Today's webinar is worth 1 clock hour of credit in the financial management domain toward the CMP application through the EIC. To receive a credit for attending this webinar, you must be present for the full hour. Upon completion of the webinar survey, you will be taken to the related Meetings Today webinar club page to obtain your credit. We encourage you to ask questions during the presentation. You may submit your questions at any time by typing your question in the designated Q&A area and hitting send. Should you experience any technical difficulties, please send a message to the Q&A or chat area, or you can also call 800-553-8878. As always, we would like to thank our generous sponsors. Thank you to Kiowa Island Golf Resort and Travel Dubuque. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Robin Miekowicz. Robin Miekowicz, CMP CMM, is the strategic partner with Innovate Meetings and Events and an industry leader and innovator. She is a frequent speaker at industry events, providing cutting-edge education to the meetings and events industry. She continually contributes articles to several meetings industry trade publications on a wide range of topics, from strategic meetings management, contract strategy, budget and cost savings techniques, and more. Robin has earned the prestigious CMP and CMM certifications. She is a past president of the MPI Orange County chapter and has served as chair of an MPI International Task Force. As president, she was responsible for overseeing a 19-member board and 400-member chapter. Robin received the 2014 MPI Rise Award for Member of the Year and was also recognized by the CIC, now the EIC, in 2013 with the Pacesetters Award. She continues to advance the meetings industry through industry volunteerism, serving on multiple advisory boards and consulting MPI chapters on strategic initiatives. And with that, I would like to extend a warm welcome and hand things over to today's speaker. Welcome, Robin.
Thanks, Danielle, and it's great to be here with you today. You know, what's interesting about contracts is that the entire landscape has changed. Everything we've thought we've known about contracts is really turned upside down. And so we're going to focus on what it looks like to negotiate and to look at your contracts in a post-shutdown world. One of the things I always find interesting is a lot of meeting professionals spend their time negotiating the rates, the food and beverage, the rental fees if there are any, and then they kind of overlook a lot of areas in the contract. And I personally feel the contract's one of the most important components, not only looking at the value adds, but making sure you have risk reduction and cost containment measures in place so that you have a course of action in any scenario, even the unexpected. Today, there are so many new challenges to consider, new clauses to add, and really a whole new way to look at risk reduction and cost containment measures. Before we do a deep dive into contracts, I think it's really important to talk about the state of the industry, trends that we're seeing, and then how that's going to affect the way that we do business. Obviously, we find ourselves in a very fluid situation for the time being. And I know a lot of us are starting to get back to face-to-face meetings and a general consensus of everyone being excited to move forward. Meetings are essential. Face-to-face is essential. And I do believe that hybrid meetings are here to stay, but nothing can replace the face-to-face experience. So let's talk real quickly about our goals for today. First and foremost, we're going to talk about trends that are going to impact the way that we do business. We're going to look at the current marketplace and how that's going to affect your negotiation strategy. We're going to look at some planning tips, how to secure the best possible contract, and not only knowing what clauses to include, but how to negotiate and defend those clauses. We'll talk about some of the variables that hotels consider when they review your overall business value, and that's going to be really important. We are amazingly in a seller's market in a lot of areas, especially first tier destinations. You would think coming out of a pandemic like we did, it would be a buyer's market, but there's a lot of hotels that have high demand right now. And so you really need to understand your business value. And then we'll talk about some key clauses and the benefit to your organization, to your bottom line, and really reducing your risk. So I know everyone's really looking at contracts with a fine-tooth comb these days, which is great. But a lot of organizations don't tend to do this until they've learned the hard way. Maybe you've been hit with a hefty cancellation fee, or maybe you found in 2020 your force majeure clause was not strong enough to cover COVID-19. One of the things I say in all my webinars is that before the contract signed, you're negotiating. But after it's signed, you're begging. So you really want to make sure that you have an ironclad contract, that you address every scenario, even the unexpected, like we find ourselves in these days. And there's really no way of predicting what the future looks like right now. We are really not walking slowly into change because the change is here. Experts knew that there would be demand after 2020, but I really don't think any of us could have anticipated the sort of demand that the hotels are seeing now across the US. Even I've been really surprised. So we've just updated all of our industry trend slides. So you're going to see the newest presentation today. We've made so many updates this month of June because everything has changed. I mean, it's been almost hard to keep up with all of the trends because things are changing at such a rapid pace. The US is on a rapid economic incline. There still is obviously a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the UK, when all of the other countries will open. Compression demand is really high for 2022 and beyond. Rates and ADR are on the rise. Hotels and businesses are having trouble keeping up with the rapid pace of demand. And the other kind of challenge that hotels are facing is a lot of them are short-staffed. Maybe they had a sales team of 10 people and now they're down to 2 or 3. But the demand is up, so it's really hard for them to keep up with that volume. Technology needs are constantly increasing. Hybrid meetings are here to stay. A lot of hotels are working to implement contactless transactions for check-in at the front desk, registration for your events, and so forth. Event operators are really working to follow the CDC guidelines, which again are constantly changing. I think that's been one of the biggest challenges of 2020 and going into 21 is the speed of change and being able to keep up with what's happening. Surcharges and fees, we're going to spend a lot of time on this as we go through the presentation because there has been so many new hotel fees and surcharges. You need to make sure that your eyes are opening to what's happening. You need to make sure that you address every fee and surcharge in your contract because you don't want your budget hit with something that's unexpected because that could have significant ramifications for your budget and even not only looking at your organization, but your attendees aren't going to be happy if they check out and their room bill has all of these charges that you didn't communicate to them. So you want to prepare for the unexpected because there's surcharges and fees that could be happening in the next month that I couldn't even think about. Labor costs are increasing. It costs more money to have the sanitation levels that are required these days. Food and beverage costs are increasing significantly. Specialty setups, outdoor setup fees, things that you need to be aware of. And then business data, really focusing on strategic meetings management measures are going to change the meetings industry. They're going to allow us to make smarter, more strategic and informed decisions. Another clause that we've been thinking about is not only cleanliness practices and social distancing, but service level guarantees and duty of care. Every hotel really seems to vary in practice, and the industry is evolving to the new dynamics in place. When it comes to these areas, you want to consider talking to your hotel about diagrams for your space because every destination, every city is different. It's changing rapidly. Make sure you understand the new dynamics and think about every area from arrival to departure and everything in between will need to be addressed. Meeting professionals are really called to a whole new level these days, and you've got to think of every single component. So the demand for RFPs is increasing significantly. Even just our team, we've seen so many RFPs just flying in. It's been insane and it's increasing quickly. You can see that in this diagram, the percentage of RFPs is up significantly in the Caribbean, Central America, Mexico, and the United States. And this is because restrictions have eased, so the RFP volume is up. Customer confidence is back in a big way. Occupancy continues to rise in the United States. I do want to note that we're not back to pre-pandemic levels yet, but we are up nonetheless, and we're headed in the right direction. Experts predict that occupancy will continue to climb, and we could be back at pre-pandemic levels by the end of 2022, which is really exciting and positive. It's the most confident I've been, so I'm really excited to share this data with you. The reason this is important to know is because this is what drives up rates at your hotels. Looking at the US market recovery monitor, and this is again as of this month, room demand has increased for the 5th straight week. Supply is also on the rise as more hotels are opening, or should I say some hotels are reopening. So that's really exciting to see. This slide represents the climb to the pre-pandemic levels and demand. As I mentioned, demand is up. It continues to climb. Experts predict that demand will be back by Q4, so the 4th quarter of 2022. So that's exciting to see. With this increased occupancy is going to come increased rates. So something you want to be aware of. You know, if you're thinking about your new RFP or when you're going to send it out, I mean, honestly, you need to send it out as soon as possible because demand is up. If you want to find the best availability and the best value, the sooner the better. Note that the ADR on the second column, we go from a $109.47 rate to a significant jump in ADR to $117.34 in 2022. This will really drive rates up because the demand is up, as I mentioned. So air travel continues to rise. Even just personally, I was at LAX the other day and I've been traveling a lot. It was so packed. I was shocked. I did not expect it to be that packed. I mean, it looked like travel was back to normal, even just on the transient side. So let's talk about what destinations are being booked in the US in 2021. Even in 2020, Orlando and Dallas were the top destinations. And now Vegas has really jumped in there and has gotten a lot of demand. They were one of the first to really open at full capacity outside of Orlando and Dallas. And they are seeing a lot of demand. They have Resorts World that just opened. So a lot of exciting new hotel openings and new builds. International, that's been really interesting. Basically in 2020 and parts of early 2021, Mexico was the only international we're seeing. It's still a big question mark for the time being. Still, travel into the US will require a negative COVID-19 test to clear travel back to the States. So that's something that's taken into consideration. There's a lot of talk about when the borders will open for the UK, the European Unions, but nobody really knows for sure. Mexico has really had the biggest draw for ease of access. They were a huge draw throughout 2020 and 2021. I know AM Resorts and Posadas USA, which Fiesta Americana falls under, they offered the COVID-19 antigen test on property at no cost to attendees with same-day results. AM Resorts went on to say that they would provide 14-day quarantine at the hotel and that it would be covered, which is an amazing offer. So when you're doing international meetings, there's a lot of components to take into consideration with the testing to get back into the US. So let's talk about some contracting strategies for the future and how we're going to think ahead. Contracting today is not like it was pre-pandemic, which I'm sure you guys are all aware of. And so we're going to talk about some really good tips, some new clauses, and different components that you need to consider. The contract is more important than ever. It's always been important, but I really encourage you to open your eyes more than ever to every area of the contract and be thinking about the things we're going to be talking about and touching on today. And please feel free to ask lots of questions, and I want to make sure I address everybody's questions today, or I'll follow up with you after today's webinar. I'll be sharing my contact information on the last screen, and I'm happy to do contract reviews with you and offer some guidance and support as well. So let's talk about some insider tips and thinking ahead. I am seeing a lot of hotels for 2020 still offering flexibility, even on previously contracted terms, which usually was really rare, but obviously understandable during this current climate. We went back actually to all of our 21 contracts to negotiate more lenient attrition clauses, lower F&B minimums. And I'd have to say most of the hotels were really flexible. They were willing to make adjustments via addendum. So a shout out to all of our amazing hotel partners out there. If you have concerns about your 2020 meetings, have open, honest conversations with your hotel partners. Communication is critical. Don't be afraid to ask if you can get some flexibility. A lot of hotels have been really wonderful for 2020. Most hotels are really offering a lot of short-term business for groups that have been under maybe 100 total rooms. I've had hotels agree to LOIs, which is called a letter of intent, where there's no attrition and no cancellation fees for those smaller type groups. I've seen hotels for the bigger groups in 21 really offer very lenient attrition and cancellation terms, and just a lot of flexibility. I would say now is the time to book your future meetings because demand is high. If you're sitting on it and waiting, you're not going to get the best value. There's going to be limited availability. There's a lot of compression in the future years. If you can do a multi-year meeting, consider doing that. I highly recommend it if you're able to do it, and you'll get multi-year discounts and really great offers. If you're uncertain about your attendance numbers, we've had groups that have booked conservatively, and then you could include a review clause and set dates and parameters in there. We've even included language that we can increase our room block by 10%, and that the hotel will guarantee that. That's another option. When it comes to your RFP, consider your flexibility points and state those. It's better to state that up front. That way you have hotels offering availability and giving you some options because they know their property best. They know what flexible points that they can offer to your group instead of having them turn down your RFP. I've honestly seen like the turn down rates in the RFPs we sent out higher than ever. So it's surprising. You think all the hotels would want this business, but I've been getting a lot of hotels turning down RFPs because they're booked. And if you think about it, a lot of meetings from 2020 or even some from 2021 were moved to 2022 and beyond. So they have all that business on the books. Dates are flying off the charts right now. I mean, if you have a date that's not flexible, highly recommend holding space as soon as possible because dates are gone like within days. I mean, you get your proposal and the next day the rate's gone or the date's not available anymore. Always confirm everything in writing. If you're going back to your existing 21 contracts, let's say you're reducing your block or F&B minimum, whatever it might be, you have to confirm that in writing. Email doesn't count. Do an addendum. And here's something we've been doing a lot of is we've been monitoring the hotel's websites for the rates they're promoting. So one of the things we're going to get into is an adjustment for published rates clause. And what that does is it guarantees you have the best group rate in-house even after the contract's been signed. That clause is extremely important. Think about groups that maybe had their meetings in early 21 and maybe the rates were a lot less, but they contracted higher because they booked it years earlier. So we want to make sure that we have rate integrity, that the hotel is going to give us the best group rate in-house. Otherwise, all of your attendees are going to book outside of the block. You want to monitor the hotel's website. You don't want to see a lower rate being promoted on their actual website because that doesn't show value to your attendees. And again, they're going to book around the block. So thinking ahead, so you want to always look at some of these areas. I always look at hotel contracts and it never talks about what happens if the hotel cancels on you, and they will absolutely cancel on you for a better piece of business. If they have a buyout and it's an incentive group and they have a lot of food and beverage outlet spend and spa and all of those other add-ons, they will definitely cancel on your group. I encourage you to pull your contracts and see if it says anything about what happens if the hotel cancels on you. Have you addressed it? It always talks about what happens if you cancel on the hotel, and it's only fair that it's addressed both ways. I'm seeing more and more organizations moving towards a custom contract. I'm seeing an increase in second option contracts. So what that means is that there's a first option group going to contract, but you're trying to push that first group and hopefully secure the dates. Option dates have been very firm. If you're working on a contract and your option date to sign is this Friday, but you're not going to be able to sign until next week, make sure you update that option date so you do not lose the space. Just because you have a contract doesn't mean they're guaranteeing you have it after your option date to sign. Even the rate deadlines, you want to be paying attention to that. And then one of the things I always want to say is a lot of times I'll see, hotels try to send short contracts, or organizations that we're working with say, oh, we have a really short contract, it'll be easy. But while that sounds nice, think about all of the areas that your organization is exposed. I mean, honestly, I don't care if the contract's long. I want to make sure I'm protected, especially in a time like this. So some things to think about with your future contracting terms. You want to go back again to your 21 contracts to see what areas you might be exposed. You want to look at what hotels are doing short-term business and see if you have anything for 2021 to see kind of what flexibility points you can get there. Some new and updated clauses to think about. I highly recommend including a purpose of meeting clause in your contract. And that basically states why you're holding this meeting, what you're trying to accomplish, and specifying your expected attendance numbers. Let me give you, and we'll dive into that clause actually in a second, so I'll table that one for a moment. I talked about mutual cancellation. You want to talk about a confidentiality clause, making sure that you protect your data, documents, materials discussed and reviewed. A review clause. This is a really great clause that sets review dates into the contract. So you could see how your pickup is coming along, if you want to release rooms early for resale, if you need to add rooms. We had a group this year that was really conservative on their numbers, and they've blown through their block. Thankfully, we had a clause that addressed we can increase our room block, and we also had a review clause in place. They were able to look at their historical data and see that they were trending higher than they even anticipated, because it's been really hard to project these days and to anticipate attendance numbers. Obviously, you know your group best, but having these review clauses in place, especially for bigger groups, is really important. We're going to be talking about force majeure and new language to add. The potential for a COVID clause, because a lot of times force majeure clauses talk about what's unforeseen, and COVID is no longer unforeseen. So if you have that language, your force majeure clause would not address it if there's, new things happening with COVID, something to think about. Duty of care, this is a really big clause. And it's going to address everything from your social distancing to sanitation levels, service level guarantees. You really need to think about the customer service levels at the hotel, because they're short-staffed and they're being tasked to do more. Not only thinking about, look at your food and beverage, like all of the dietary restrictions and food allergies and sensitivities, that takes more staff to manage that. The sanitation and cleanliness levels, that takes more staff to manage that, except hotels are short-staffed. Maybe they can't clean the rooms as fast or turn rooms as quickly. Maybe the banquet level, service levels, they don't have enough staffing there. I've even heard just like the restaurants are staying at lower capacities, even though they can open to 100%, but they're staying at smaller capacities because they don't have the staff. So you need to find out, is the hotel operating at full capacity? What does that look like? These are questions we've never had to ask before, but you need to think about these days. So let's talk a little bit about revenue management standards and really understanding your value. All hotels, big, small, chain, independent, they have revenue management standards in place. Hotels are in the business of making money. They want to maximize their occupancy and their revenues. Hotels often oversell. As an example, if they have 500 rooms, they might sell more than the amount of rooms they even have, taking into account the opportunity to maximize revenue and no-shows. They obviously have their historical data on no-show levels. You really want to assess your RFP against each specific revenue management criteria. This will enhance your value-based negotiations process. So here's some of the variables that are going to influence pricing and availability. This is how hotels value your meeting. First and foremost, they're going to look at transient demand over your dates. If you're at a beach hotel in the summer, they're going to have high transient demand. Transient business pays a way higher rate than group business. Obviously, transient demand fluctuates throughout the year. If they're going to have, more shoulder or low shoulder dates, they're going to have group business drive revenue over those dates. You want to look at your arrival and departure pattern. Even asking the question, if I shift my dates by 1 or 2 days, can I save? Sometimes you can save 20% off your group rate. Rooms to space ratio. If you're The hotels say if you take 30% of their room block, they'll give you 30% of their meeting space. Calculate out your space, know your flex point. Can you reuse your general session for a breakout room or meals? Looking at food and beverage, this is the hotel's second largest profit center at about 38% gross profit. Sales managers are going to benchmark your food and beverage spend against your budget, and they want to look at the room rentals as well. If they're saying that there is a room rental, see if you can increase your F&B spend instead of throwing away on meeting room rental. Meeting room rental is a pure profit center for the hotels. I always say I would rather pay more in F&B so I can actually provide value to my attendees and an upgraded experience than just throwing that away on room rental. Look at the season, look at your history. Hotels do share that data. If you've had poor pickup in years prior, they are going to look at that and take that into consideration. Know your incremental revenue. This is your spend on AV, the business center, spa, golf. This can definitely aid your negotiations. And you should communicate, note this in your contracts, create a clause that you want this data tracked, communicate to your hotel partners, because every hotel is able to track that differently. So talk to your hotel partners how you can capture those different spend categories of food and beverage outlets. You know, if your attendees are on their own for dinner, how can you capture that spend? You want to have all that data so that you're armed and dangerous, as I say, so you can communicate your value, because that all matters. You want to know what other groups are contracted over your dates, who will be in the space adjacent to you. And then you want to make sure that you just understand the director of revenue management's role. They're going to dictate all of these factors, and your sales manager, they're going to be the gatekeeper to the director of revenue management. So just to give you some idea of the average hotel profit margins, it's important to know that sleeping rooms is their biggest profit center at about 75% gross profit, followed by food and beverage at about 35% gross profit. And then it goes down and change to the hotel restaurant spend, spa, golf, and retail. So you definitely want to know what your spend is in these various categories. In first tier destinations, we're going to find ourselves in a position where the hotels can be choosy about which groups and business they select. That's why I'm sharing this data with you. So I know I talked about hotel fees and surcharges. I want to spend some time on this. Hotel fees and surcharges are through the roof. I know obviously the numbers for 2020 would kind of be irrelevant at this point, but I do want to give you the 2019 numbers to kind of put it into perspective. They were at an all-time high at $2.93 billion. Hotels make a ton of money off of hotel fees and surcharges. Look at your resort fees. Look at the inclusions. Do you even need those items? Let's say you're going to a resort hotel, but the attendees are in your meeting all day and they can't even enjoy the amenities that the resort fee offers. It's always negotiable. See if you can get it waived, even reduced. Another thing that I found really interesting, I was at a hotel. We had a group that's a repeat group. They were at this one hotel in 2018, and now they're going to go back in 2021. The resort fee had obviously increased over these years. But since I actually had the data, I pulled my 2018 contract. I was able to look at what the resort fee included in 2018 versus what it included in 2021. The price had increased, but the amount of things that they were offering that the resort fee covered reduced significantly. And that was really surprising to me. Most of the times you don't have that data. You can't see what was removed from the resort fee. So it was really good to see that comparison, to see that there was a list, I think it was like around 20 items that it included, and now it was only like 12 things, but they wanted us to pay more. Most of the times, obviously, we can't see those previous inclusions, but you have to realize a lot of times hotels have reduced the amount of offerings that the resort fee includes. And if they reduced it and they're trying to charge you the same amount, that's not fair, it doesn't make sense. A lot of city hotels are trying to charge resort fees, but they're calling urban hotel fees. So they're going to come up with all sorts of fees and surcharges, even early check-in. That's been really big in Las Vegas. Another one that, we never would have thought about years previously is wall electricity. I mean, who would have thought you can't just plug something into the wall in the meeting room, and now they could charge you for it. Audit fees, we always include in our contracts that the hotel will provide a complimentary audit. Otherwise, they can charge you for that. And let's say you have individuals making their own attendees. It's a big group. There's always people that book around the block, always. So you want to make sure that you capture all of those rooms. It could be a lot in some cases. For our bigger groups, we always do audits. And There's always rooms captured. Even sometimes it saved us from paying attrition fees. So you want to, and it's great for your complimentary room policy as well. There's also hidden charges. So let's say you sign your contract and now you're on site and all of a sudden there's like new fees and surcharges you never even thought about. Here's an example. We always assume with your meeting space that tables and chairs and linens, water pitchers, those things seem like obvious, automatic inclusions. Who's to say the hotel can't say, sorry, every chair is now this price, or we're going to charge you for every table or linen or whatever it might be. I mean, there could be things that I couldn't even think about that nobody could have anticipated. There could even be a COVID surcharge fee. I mean, they have increased costs to do all that, sanitation levels. So you want to think about all of those unexpected expenses. And one of the things I've just found really interesting lately is that even personally, but on our master, personally, I've just seen, just shopping myself, there's all sorts of fees added to like my restaurant bills at hotels. I did a site visit at a hotel. It was peak season. And so they offered me a discounted rate, but I checked out and I had like 10 different hotel fees and surcharges. I've never seen that many in my life. I mean, obviously you have your room tax, occupancy, all of that, but there was ones that I'd never even heard of. And it was like acronyms. So I didn't even know what it was. Thankfully, we caught it on the site bill and we were able to negotiate that before we went to contract. But there's fees I could have never even thought about. And when you have your room bill and it's like your room rate and then 10 taxes below, your attendees are not going to be happy if they're paying for their room. So it's going to be more important than ever. And then you really want, when you're reconciling your bill, I highly recommend doing a master account statement clause in your contract. So they break it out for you. So one bill for sleeping rooms, one for AV, one for F&B, one for spa, if you have spa spend, golf. And the reason this is important is it makes it easier for reconciliation purposes. And one of the things I've been seeing the past few months is that there's so many additional fees that they're just trying to sneak in. So really scrutinize your bill, because you'll see that they're starting to charge, they're trying to make up for lost revenue. And they're adding new fees and surcharges and they're slipping them in. And it's been surprising to see what they've been trying to charge for. So if you don't address in your contract that no additional hotel fees and surcharges can be added after the contract signed, then they can absolutely add those and you have no leverage. You just are stuck paying for it. So you want to make sure you address that, because if you do get those hidden fees and surcharges added to your room bill or to your master account, you could be like, you know what, this is not in our contract, this fee. It states right here that you can't add anything other than what's outlined. So that gives you your leg to stand on. That's the biggest thing, is you want to have your contract as a go-to, that you can pull it and be like, oh no, sorry, our contract actually says you can't do this. Otherwise, what course of action? You're just begging the hotel. So duty of care and service level guarantee. As I mentioned, with new safety and cleanliness protocols, that takes more staff to meet those requirements. The other challenge is that a lot of hotel team members have been furloughed or laid off completely. I think there's also going to be just like training challenges, because everyone's trying to hire. Everyone's hiring. So now you have all this new staff. So you can have potential, not the quality that you're accustomed to. Maybe you're at a Four Seasons or a Ritz as an example, and you're accustomed to a certain caliber of service. And maybe your attendees are going to be disappointed. I mean, that's going to affect your experience. Even check-in. What if there's long lines at check-in when people are arriving and it's an incentive and now they're not happy and it started off on the wrong foot? So you want to think about all of those service levels to make sure that you have a great experience and that your attendees enjoy attending your meeting. So you want to address this in your contract. You want to address staffing levels. What about room service? Let's say they're on their own for breakfast as an example, and you imagine maybe there's going to be a lot of room service orders for breakfast. Communicate that to the hotel. Make a guarantee in your contract. Maybe it's 45 minutes max as an example. I mean, you can negotiate that with the hotel, but you don't want people waiting over an hour, hour and a half, and that's a real reality. Are all of the outlets open at the hotel? What if you're dining on your own for dinner and there's only one place open for dinner? And now everyone has nowhere to go. What if you're at a hotel that's not walking distance to other restaurants? Like, what's going to happen there? So you have to even think about your attendees' experience when they're on their own for meals. Is this restaurants fully open? Maybe you're at a beach hotel. Are all the rentals available? Are the pools all open? Is the spa even open? I mean, you have to think of every single component. from arrival to departure. And, look at when you're on your site visits, you have to experience it like you're the guest and think of every single aspect and avenue more than ever. What about the cleanliness levels? What does that look like? Have you addressed that in your contract? A lot of hotels have their, duty of care overview. So make sure you obtain that document and you hold the hotel to that. Make sure that even looking at like the public restrooms cleanliness, even all of the different outlets at the hotel, what that looks like. And then you want to make sure that you address all of the CDC language, which again is constantly changing. So purpose of meeting, I think we could have already dived in on this, but just to give you an example of why this clause is important, what it does is it states the purpose of your meeting, so everybody's on the same page. It addresses something that could be unforeseen. And then if your purpose has been frustrated, then you actually have a course of action. So let me give you an example. I had an incentive group that was supposed to happen earlier this year, 2021. They were supposed to use the spa, golf, obviously it was a true incentive type program, and all of those areas were closed, like the spa was closed, so they wouldn't even be able to enjoy the spa. Not all of the F&B outlets were open. And so it compromised the entire purpose of the meeting. And because of that, because it was addressed, the hotel was able to release us due to force majeure. It didn't make sense for us to hold an incentive meeting when it wouldn't be a nice experience for all of these achievers. And so we were able to move the dates. So that's a really good example of when your purpose of meeting would come into play. Resort fee, I know we touched on this, but you want to really pay attention to what's included in the resort fee. Unfortunately, I know it's hard to see what the previous inclusions were. I just had a great example with that 2018 contract, so I was actually able to see the differences. But you have to realize that a lot of times they're not offering what they normally would include with that resort fee. Again, are you going to even use that? Can it be discounted or reduced? Can it be waived? Have those questions. And just looking at your contract, when you're in first or second tier destinations, you really need to know how to negotiate with those destinations. There's a lot of demand in the first tier destinations, whereas with second tier destinations, they're still willing to cut deals. So, I've seen a lot of groups that would have never considered some second tier destinations being more open to that. And I would definitely keep your eyes open and maybe have those conversations with your stakeholders. I know we touched on review clauses already, but for those bigger groups, if you're contracting several years out, even just, it's a great clause to have in place. Put select dates in there. You could even address that you'd be allowed to reduce your room block by X dates or your F&B. Track your historical data. You should always be doing, your group best. So are they picking up later than usual? Are you 2 months out and you're blowing through your block already? Then maybe you need to increase. And these clauses would address that. So as I stated earlier, hotels typically make about 75% gross profit on sleeping rooms. If your group experiences attrition, it's fair to pay the hotel's profit margin on sleeping rooms. But I want you to be crystal clear that hotels do not make 100% profit on their sleeping rooms. I typically use the 75% calculation. So as an example, if your room rate was $100, I would pay 75% of that, or $75. No hotel makes 100%. If they give me pushback on that number, then I'll ask them what their profit margin is. And I'll say, fine, I'll go up to 80 or 85%. That's fine. But it's basically the bottom line is paying a fair amount. You want to include those calculations in your contract. What is 80% of your room block? Because surprisingly, two people can calculate that completely differently. What is 75% of your room rate? Every cent makes a difference. And if there's taxes involved or not, you want to look at all of those things. And basically the bottom line here is to make sure that the contract's fair. Always include rebook and resell language with your attrition. Resell language is important for attrition just like it is for cancellation, especially if you're going to a hotel that's high demand, like a summer, beach hotel. Highly likely they can resell. They'll probably get a better rate than your group would have paid. So they've been made whole. So you shouldn't also pay attrition. That's called double dipping. And if you don't address it, they will absolutely charge you. Rate integrity. I know I touched on this a little bit. One of the biggest things I often see is that a group would find like 1 month out, the hotel's offering a better rate on the website, lower than your group rate. Obviously, I know there's wholesale websites like hotels.com and many others, and they offer, highly discounted rates. but those are like a very limited amount of rooms. And you know what? If you include the correct language in your contract, even if your attendees, a couple attendees, maybe you have 3 people book, on Expedia or hotels.com or whatever other websites are on there. If you have language, you can state you can still get credit for those rooms regardless of rate paid, for all rooms booked around the block if you have the correct and appropriate language in your contract. And again, that's when your audit would come in handy. What if you have a few rooms in attrition, but you do your audit, you can capture those and now you have to pay nothing. It's important to negotiate into your contract that if the hotel's offering a lower rate or maybe promoting hot rates over your meeting dates, that they match that or remove it from their inventory. You want to make sure that you get credit for all rooms for pickup purposes, even rooms around your block. You also want to make sure you get credit for your complimentary room policy. You could defend this clause by sharing that these rooms, these attendees would not be at the hotel if it wasn't for your event. And so that's one of the things I always talk about, not only having the clauses, but knowing how to defend it. So again, those people would not be at the hotel if it wasn't for your group. That's the defense there. I mean, they wouldn't be booking on the hotels.com or at the hotel's website if it wasn't for your group being at the hotel. With the audit, again, you want to address that in your contract, and you always want to have everything in writing so that if I have any challenges or any issues, I literally just pull my contract and I'm like, nope, it says it right here, or here's where this is addressed. And then the hotel can't do anything. Otherwise, you have no course of action. And it's really up to the hotel if they feel like working with you or not. And I know a lot of groups that say they have great relationships, or they've worked with the same hotel for 10, 20 years, whatever it might be, or they have the same person they've worked with forever. I mean, I hate to say this, but honestly, relationships have gone out the window these days because everyone's been furloughed or laid off. All my hotel contacts that I thought I had, they're not even there anymore. So all of those great relationships I've had, I've got new contacts at all the hotels. I have new GSOs in a lot of cases. And so the hotels are trying to make money right now. They're trying to recoup all of that lost revenue. And so that's their focus. Cutoff date. This is an example of the different perspectives on cutoff date. One being the meeting professional's side and the other the hotel's perspective. When negotiating the cutoff date, I always try to ask for 3 weeks out. And having the historical data on your attendees, like I've even had groups that their data shows they always book 2 weeks out. And I've had hotels work with us because we have the data to back that up. Look at your pacing reports, track that historical data, see how you're trending year over year. This will allow you to make strategic decisions. Maybe you need to add rooms before it's too late and before the hotel sells out. You don't want to have to go to an overflow hotel. Or maybe you want to release rooms earlier because you're trending lower than usual and you don't want to have attrition. And because you did that, now you can get those rooms resold by the hotel. Early departure fees. When it comes to negotiating the early departure fee, there are a couple of approaches that I like to take. If I have rooms going to the master account, I always negotiate there are no early departure fees because I've already guaranteed my room block with my attrition clause. So if I've guaranteed 80% of my room block as an example, I'm picking up 80% of my block. I've guaranteed it regardless of what happens. Even if I only pick up 70% of my block, I have to pay the other 10%. So there should be no early departure fees. The other approach you can take is that if individual attendees are paying for their own room and tax, is you can add verbiage that if the attendee were to pay an early departure fee, that would be applied or credited towards your group in the case of attrition purposes. And if you don't have that simple sentence that I just said, then they could collect the early departure fee from the attendee and charge you attrition. I'm going to skip over the audit because I know we already talked about that and I want to save time for Q&A at the end. Let's get into function space. One of the things I cannot stress enough is never, ever, ever sign a contract without specific meeting room assignments. They must be guaranteed by function or you do not sign that contract. And even if they are there, make sure that it says that they cannot change the space at the hotel's discretion. Or if your room block decreases, the hotel can change your space. Okay, I would never want the hotel to change my space without my written approval. So yes, if your attendance numbers decreases significantly, sure, it's fair that you're going to probably get moved into different space, but that should be with your written approval. That should be addressed. And if you're not guaranteeing your meeting space in your contract, I mean, they could put you anywhere. The hotel has no obligation of what room they could put you in. Maybe their room has columns, or maybe they're going to put you in the foyer for something that can't be in a foyer space. Never have tentative, never have TBD, never have ample, never have reasonable, always specific, always put exact dates, always put exact dollar amounts, exact space, and no changes without written approval. If there's special setups or outdoor setup fees, those are all negotiable. And again, state what those fees are in the contract, not that the hotel will just charge you outdoor setup fees, because that could be an astronomical amount. Relocation. So I've noticed that a lot of this is missing from hotel contracts. But if you don't have this clearly addressed, then the hotel has no obligation to assure your attendees are not walked to another hotel. If the hotel oversells their sleeping rooms, which they often do, I'm amazed by how many people are surprised by that, but they're in the business of making money. They're going to maximize their profitability. So you need to have a course of action. I see a lot of groups try to say no walk policies, but there's innkeeper laws. Hotels can't evict a guest. If a guest wants to stay past their checkout date, or there's another group in house and something happens and now they're staying a day late, they can't kick that group out or those people out. There's laws in place that prohibit that. And so sure, you can have a no walk policy for your VIPs, but if you don't address relocation, then you'll have no course of action. You should make sure that they're at a comparable hotel, that they're not going to walk your VIP guests, and that you as a meeting planner are going to be notified of who is relocated, so it's not your speaker. You want to make sure that you address every scenario, that they'll bring them back as soon as possible, and even that you get credit for that room for your pickup purposes and for your complimentary room policy. So you want to make sure that you always have a course of action addressed and that you're aware that this happens, it's a real reality. And with the demand the way it is, I have a feeling that this is going to happen a lot more. Cancellation. So I want to challenge everybody to pull your past contracts, because it always says what happens if you cancel on the hotel. But does it say what happens if the hotel cancels on you? That's a reality. It happens. I've had it happen, and they don't just cancel for something major. I mean, they could just cancel for a better piece of business. Look at your food and beverage damages. That should be based on profit as well, not just your sleeping rooms. And, you know, why would you pay food and beverage damages a year out, 6 months out? The hotel hasn't even ordered the food yet. Look at your cancellation clause. I would challenge you to really scrutinize that. Make sure you have strong resell and rebook language in your cancellation clause as well. Force majeure. So with all that's happening in the world these days, this clause had better be solid, and it is beyond acts of God. There are so many force majeure clauses that I see that are just so basic, and they address just acts of God, like, you know, hurricanes, flooding, that kind of stuff, earthquakes. But I want to encourage you to address warnings or advisories from the World Health Organization, for the CDC, diseases, pandemics. I know everyone's got their eyes open to that now. Thankfully, we already addressed that in our contract years ago, and so we were protected, and we didn't pay one, cancellation fee because of the pandemic in 2020. You want to make sure that deposits are never non-refundable. Always strike that language, because if it's a force majeure situation and you have non-refundable, they get to keep all your money, and that could be a lot of money. You should be reimbursed for that if it's force majeure. Watch for the word unforeseen. COVID is no longer unforeseen, and now they're talking about this Delta variant. Nobody knows what could happen. And so if you don't have proper language in your contract, you're going to learn the hard way, unfortunately. If hotels are adding like the percentage of attendees, pay attention to that. Is it only in the hotel's location where force majeure could be applied if something's happening where the hotel's located? What if your attendees, are coming, like a majority are coming from an airport that's shut down for some reason, or something happens? You need to think about all of those scenarios. And I cannot say it enough: communicate, 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 over communicate. Even if you're not sure, I've just, with my hotel partners these days, I've been communicating more than ever. And I've said, hey, we're not sure if we need to reduce our block. We're a little concerned. Have open and honest conversations and communicate with your hotel partners everything that's happening. Or, just say, hey, we might need to, I just said this with a client the other day, we might need to increase our block. How are things looking? We're not sure yet, but just how are things looking? And the hotel told us they were, getting close to selling out. So then we took those steps to increase the block. Or maybe you're like, I'm not sure if I should, reduce our block now. And the hotel will say, you know what, we could sell those rooms, maybe reduce a little bit. So have those, conversations with your hotel partners and see what their recommendations are. So I think it's important to even sometimes have a walkaway plan if it comes down to that. If a hotel is not going to budge on crucial clauses, sometimes there's no other choice. I understand that. But if you can have a hotel as a backup, I've had situations where we were going to move forward with Hotel A, but they were so difficult on the contract. They had a take it or leave it approach. And so I was able to talk to the client and we moved to Hotel B because they really wanted the business. And that really is a precursor of what to come of what is to come once you're on site. What would have happened as we got closer to the meeting or when we were on site? And I feel like things would have been just as difficult with that hotel had we have gone forward. So if for some reason you cannot, that's the only hotel you can move forward with and are being very difficult, I highly recommend communicating all of those concerns and challenges to your stakeholders so that at least you've done your due diligence. So when something happens, you're not the one on the line. You've already communicated to the powers that be, and then they're the ones that wanted to move forward. So you can kind of wipe your hands of that and say, I told you all of these concerns and challenges. So I have seen lots of questions and chats coming through. I haven't been able to look at them yet. I know Danielle's going to go through those right now. I've included my contact information on the screen. I know we had like 700 registrants for today, so feel free to email me if you have follow-up questions or if you want to review one of your contracts. I'd be happy to look at that for you. And Danielle, I'll throw it over to you for Q&A.
Great, thanks, Robin. That was a super informative session. So we're beginning our Q&A session now. So you can submit your questions at any time by typing your question in the designated Q&A area and hitting send. We already have quite a few that have come in. So the first one for you, Robin, is how are you seeing amended terms impact your commission for contracts that were executed pre-pandemic?
Honestly, my clients are my priority, and that's one of the things that I showed this year to all of our clients. That's why we've worked with them for over 20 years. I had their best interest at heart in a time like this. I mean, we kind of put ourselves to the side on this and we did what was best for our clients. And yes, it was a really, 2020 was a really tough year, but now all of that hard work and all of the meetings we moved and just showing a true partnership and value to our clients, it's coming back to us and it was worth it because we're getting more business than ever. The RFPs have been flying in. We've gotten a lot of new clients. And so sometimes you have to make that sacrifice and you have to do what's best for your clients and it comes back.
Great. The next question is, I would love to have a custom contract. However, there always seems to be some pushback. What would you recommend in this regard?
I would say, I'll tell you actually our data. In the US, 90% of the time, we use our own custom contract with the exception of Las Vegas and New York. So what we've done in those two destinations with like MGM, Caesars, is we've already put together a contract with them so that we don't have to recreate the wheel every single time you go to contract with the major hotels on the Vegas Strip. And so we have those contracts in place that are specific to those hotel chains. And then same for New York with some of the major ones. And then international, what I'll do is I'll just incorporate our clauses. I'll have the hotels send us their contract and then I incorporate our language. It's just easier to have a custom contract domestically. And like I said, 90% of the time we're using it.
Next is, what is the timeline that you recommend for a review clause? Is that 60 days, 30 days?
I can't give a flat answer on that because it really varies. You know your group best. I mean, you could even do 6 months out for bigger groups. You could put in I usually put in like for bigger groups, I'll put in like 3 different review dates. You could look at how things are looking, 6 months out, 3 months out, 1 month out. I mean, you have to decide what works best for you and based on your group size as well.
Another question we have from a couple people was if you could go back to your new and updated clauses slide and further explain what poaching protection means.
Oh, there's a lot of poaching that happens. There's these rogue groups, they're called like pirates. It's kind of funny. But they basically it's usually like more for like citywides where that happens, where these like poaching pirates will create fake websites and say, hey, you can book a lower rate through us, but it's fake. It's not even a real room. So your attendees would pay these people and they wouldn't even have a room at the hotels at these rates. It's completely just fake and set up. So for larger groups and citywides, you really need to pay attention to that. I see it happen a lot in Vegas.
Next one is about hotels. How do you know if they're answering truthfully about their current staffing levels?
You know, that's really hard. I would definitely talk to your sales manager and your CSM. I would talk to them about what percentage of the restaurants are open because they have those numbers. I mean, they could tell you if they're at full capacity or not. See what's open at the hotel or what's closed. I mean, those are questions they can't really like lie about. And then you could talk to them about like staffing levels. Maybe you can get a recommendation from a past group. And there's a lot of really great online blogs and communities on LinkedIn and Facebook where you can ask who else has held a meeting here. How was your experience? I think those forums have been really helpful. And I've asked a lot of questions on them myself.
So the next question addresses the hidden fees. I think you might have answered this, but maybe just go through it again. Do you have an all-encompassing clause, or what is your solution around those?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that beginning of that question?
Around hidden fees. Do you have an all-encompassing clause?
So basically, I address every fee and surcharge in the contract, definitely trying to negotiate those. And I make sure I have that conversation with the hotel. And then I add language that says, I have a surcharges clause that says no additional fees or surcharges can be added to the individual attendee folio or to our master account. So you want to address both the individual attendee if they're paying for their own rooms as well as your master account.
I think we have time for one more question. So this will be the last one for now. So earlier you mentioned that F&B rates are going to rise. This person asked their hotels for next year about their rates rising, and they said they didn't know but didn't foresee anything out of the norm. Is this not what you've been seeing or hearing? Unsure how to budget for food and beverage right now.
You know, rates are going through the roof all over the US for food and beverage. I mean, things have increased significantly. I even just saw it myself at Costco the other day. So what I would say is one of the things you could negotiate if let's say you're doing a 2022 meeting or 23 meeting, you could, instead of doing a discount because you have no idea what 22 could look like, you can say that you'll get the 2021 banquet menu pricing. That's one idea. So at least you know what it is now in 21. And then you have that guaranteed for 22 versus just doing the discounts. Or the second scenario is you can negotiate custom menus and then you can include that in your contract. So we have a group that does that. It's a breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We let the hotel know our budget. We work with the banquet chef. He customizes the menus and the pricing, and it's in the contract and it's guaranteed and can't change. It already says the specific meals, even the breaks, and it addresses the price. And so we're all set.
Great. Well, thanks, Robin. We had some questions we didn't get to, and I know you said you were going to provide your contact information so people can follow up after this webinar if they have some more questions for you. As we close out this presentation, there are just a few important pieces of information that we would like to share with you all. Be sure to join us on July 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern for the new live engagement program, Virtual is Here to Stay. We hope you join us. Also available on our website, you will find a vault of information on past webinars available for you to view at any time at your convenience. As always, we would like to thank our sponsors. Thank you again to Kiowa Island Golf Resort and Travel Dubuque. Upon completion of this webinar and survey, you will be redirected to today's related webinar club page. Each webinar has its own unique webinar club page where you can download the presentation, view the webinar on demand, obtain your CMP credit certificate, and much more. Thank you so much again, Robin, and to all of you for joining us for this webinar. We hope you have a great day and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.